As we finish up Chapter 5, we have kind of two concepts left. We're going to talk about marginal cost. We did not deal with that in our prior look, Part 3. And then we're going to take a look at who would look at this information once this grid is actually completed. Again, we've kind of cleaned a few things up here. Marginal revenue is selling price. Example of our variable cost would be an hourly worker. An example of our fixed cost would be lights. Again, we're using the word marginal is another way of saying more. We take a look at total profit. That's total revenue less total cost, and that's how we would get and finish up this grid. When we talk about marginal cost, the idea of marginal cost is we're going to take our change in variable cost and we're going to divide that by change in output. So if we look at that as an example, the change in variable cost is going to be the change in our total cost here, or our variable cost. If we got $75 for our first worker and we need to pay another $75 for our second worker, and then we need to pay another $75 for our third worker, so on and so forth as we fill out our grid, well, how much more are we getting for that additional $75 each time? We're going to concentrate on our marginal product. Okay? If we look at our first calculation of marginal product, we go from 0 to 1 worker. Well, how much more do we have to pay for that? Well, we go from 0 to 75, or we go from 100 to 175. You can look at it either way. We're spending an additional $75 for what? To get 8 more units. Okay, we got 0 the last time. We now got 8. So the difference, the marginal product, how much more are we getting? 8, as compared to how much more do we got to spend? 75. We turn around and we look at, well, let's look at 2 workers. Okay, well, how much more are we spending? We go from 175 up to 250, or our variable cost goes from 75 up to 150. Either way, we're spending an additional $75 when we go from 1 worker to 2 workers. Well, what are we getting for that additional $75? Well, we go from 8 total product up to 20. Okay, so how much more are we getting? Well, we're getting 12 more. How much more did we have to pay? 75 more. So change in variable cost, in this case, will be $75 divided by our change in output, which would be 12. That's how we got the number of 625. How did we get $4.93? Well, each new product we're producing, the change in change in cost, as compared to how much more are we getting. So in this example, $75 is always going to be on the top part of the fraction. The marginal product number, how much more are we getting, is going to be on the bottom part of the fraction. That's going to give us a number. As we look at who would bother to look at information like this, there are a couple of people. The first person that we would want to look at would be our production manager, and they're going to want to see where are we the most efficient. Well, how would you figure that out? How would you know where you're the most efficient? If you head back to your grid, you would look, and as we'd fill this all the way out, we would say, well, wherever our marginal product is the biggest, okay, where adding a new worker gets us the most bang for our buck, okay? Another way of looking at that is where is our marginal cost the lowest, okay? Marginal product the largest or marginal cost the lowest. That is going to tell us where we are working the most efficiently. If we look at who would be a second person who would possibly want to look at this information, well, your accountant's going to want to break even. You're going to want to have at least enough revenue to cover your costs coming out. As we look at that example, where would we find that? We would look for total profit being something larger than a negative number. Okay, in this example, we have $176 coming in revenue, $175 in expenses. When your total profit is a positive number, you know you've broken even. Okay, in this example, we break even at 1 worker. That may not be the case in other homework assignments. That may not be the case in an actual business. But in this hypothetical example, we have the company breaking even at 1 worker. Lastly, the last person who's going to want to look at this is going to be the owner. And the owner is going to want to know, where am I making the most money? Where is the most profit being generated? That, again, in theory is pretty simple. You go down your grid. It's not filled out, but you go down your grid, and wherever your profit number is the highest, that's probably where you're going to produce. You know, if you have a meeting with 3 people sitting in there, one being the accountant saying, well, we need to have at least 1 worker, we can break even. You then have your product manager saying, well, we need to have 5 workers, because at 5 workers, that's where our marginal product is the largest. Or you say the owner, well, I want us producing at 9 workers because that's where I make the most amount of money, most profit. So depending on who you are, you may have different views of this production grid and what it means to you. But those are your 3 people that are going to look at it. Your production manager, trying to find your place that you're most efficient. Your accountant's going to want to find where you break even. And in turn, your owner is going to want to find where they make the most amount of money.